Welcome back to my channel. I really appreciate you stopping by. Today I'm going to talk about a little something different here, and this has mostly to do about books and publishing and literature and what it's like to be an independent author, and mostly about a new series that I am launching that I'm really excited about. So if you're interested in things like fantasy fiction, adventure fiction, independent authors, independent publishing, this might be right up your alley because, again, I am really excited about this project and I'd like to tell you all about it. So, this is the Phoenix Saga, and this is my take on doing a large scale, epic, kind of high stakes, high concept series of books. And I wanted to do that. I've always been fascinated with that idea, and it took a long time for me to kind of get to a place where I felt that I had the chops to pull something like that off, because I started out really many years ago writing short stories, and that's pretty typical for a lot of authors. You start out, you write short stories, and you kind of get into the groove, you find your pattern, you find your own kind of voice. And short stories are great because they don't take super long to do. You get a cool idea, you can get through it relatively quickly, and the payoff is quicker because you get done with it quicker and you have that sense of satisfaction that you completed something. So if you're an aspiring writer, if you're interested in writing, my advice is always to, write some short stories. Just get some stories down on paper. And it's a great way to build momentum because it just feels really good to finish a story, and then you get excited about starting the next one, and you can do that. It's when you start getting into writing bigger pieces, novellas, novels, then you really got something that takes a little bit more of a effort. It takes a little bit more planning. It takes a little bit more patience because it's just a longer bit of work to do, and the payoff doesn't come as quickly, and sometimes you run into the pitfalls of the story moving in different directions and things like that. And so if you start out with short stories, then it's a lot easier to move into the bigger stories that way. So what I did was I started with short stories, then I started dabbling in the novel form. I started trying to write novels, and I actually wrote my first novel-length story, I'll call it that, a long time ago. I was 20 years old, and I wrote a 300-page novel. And it's no good. It's sitting in a closet right now. No one will ever see it. But that wasn't the point. And I knew at the time I was writing it, I had no aspirations of publishing or anything like that. I just wanted to prove to myself that I can do it. And so when I wrote one, then that was great. Then I knew, okay, so I can sustain a story for 300 pages. I know how to do it. I've done it. And now I just got to learn how to do it well. And so I spent a lot of years just trying to work on that, trying to be good at that, trying to learn from people and study that craft and do the best I could with it. And for a long time, that's what I would do. I would write one and done novels. I would write stories that ended and that was it. And then eventually I got to the point where, another big challenge would be, can I write a series? Can I sustain this thing beyond just one story? So that was kind of the natural progression for me. It's like, can I write a story that goes beyond one volume and do that? So I came up with an idea. I came up with a set of characters. I came up with a concept that I was really excited about. And I wrote a 3-book series. Again, that is not published. There's a long story behind that. I won't get into that right now. Maybe I'll do a video about that one of these days. But I just want to kind of give you some background about what led up to the Phoenix Saga. But the thing about that series was it was one and done stories. So they weren't like a serialized thing. I had a set of characters. I had a concept. They would go on an adventure in one book, and then it would get wrapped up. Then they'd go on the adventure in another book, and that story get wrapped up. And they went on an adventure in a third book, and that story got wrapped up. So what I found that I was doing with that series was I was sustaining these characters and these ideas beyond one story, but I was really just telling three separate stories with the same set of characters. So in a way, I was almost kind of writing individual novels. I just happened to have the same characters carry over. So I did that, and then I thought to myself, can I write an epic story arc? Can I write a 3-book story that carries over into 3 separate stages, 3 separate volumes, and completes one whole set, one whole arc of a story? Now, that was a greater challenge because now I had to figure out how to craft the first story and end it appropriately, how to introduce the second story and up the stakes and end that appropriately, and how to lead into the third story and up the stakes again, and then tie everything together by the end of that story. And that was a huge challenge, but it was one that I was very excited to try. And so that's what I did. I sat down and I envisioned what this would be. And the natural kind of inclination I had was to tell a fantastical story, was to build my own world from scratch. I did not want it set in the context of the current reality we live in. I wanted to make the world. And I'd never done that before either. Everything I'd written prior to that were stories that were set in this type of world that we live in. And it had a very familiar feel to the world I knew and grew up in, and the world I understood and had been experiencing up to that point. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And that was just my style, what drove me. But this was a chance to actually invent the world. And that excited me. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to tell what they call high concept, high fantasy. And this is the idea of mythology, magic, creatures. So think mythical creatures, think just fantastical, magical things. I don't like to compare what I'm doing to like modern pop culture because I just don't like doing that. However, in this context, I think it's appropriate. So imagine like Lord of the Rings, and I'm not saying this is on par with that. Trust me, I'm not saying that, but I'm just using this as a context. So like Lord of the Rings, you have Middle Earth, you have a fantastical realm, you have hobbits, they're mythical, kind of not real creatures. You have ogres, you have elves, you have these imaginative beings that don't exist in the real world. I wanted to do something like that. So I came up with this concept that I call the Phoenix Saga. Now, the word saga is very important here. I wanted this to be a saga. I wanted this to be, like I said earlier, an arc that went over several stories. I wanted it to begin with book 1, and I wanted to carry these characters through a trilogy, through an arc, and make it a saga that you follow along with. And so what I came up with was a concept that really fascinated me. And so it centers on the idea of the myth of the phoenix. Now, the myth of the phoenix goes all the way back into antiquity. And you've probably heard of it. It's a mythical bird that at the end of its life cycle, it dies in like a big pyre of flames. It bursts into a big pyre of flames and then gets reduced to ashes. And then from the ashes of that original creature, a new phoenix is born and rises again. So it's got that very much that death and resurrection theme going on, and that fascinated me. I'm like, I really want to explore that. I want to do something with that. And so knowing that I wanted to use the phoenix is kind of the main thing that I wanted to hang my hat on here, and I wanted to build the world and the story around that, the next natural progression was, well, what am I going to populate this world with? And so I started really going down a deep rabbit hole of mythology. And I was just researching and learning about ancient myths and ancient creatures from those myths and ancient stories that fascinated me. And that's when I decided that what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of cherry pick different creatures from antiquity, from mythology, going back hundreds and thousands of years, and I'm going to find the ones of those that fit what I need here, and I'm going to plug them into my world and into my story. And so that's what I did. I decided that I am going to create a world, and I'm going to populate it entirely with mythical creatures. Now, some of them will have human-like attributes, and I'll get into that in a little bit. And some of them will be more animal-like, because that's how a lot of these creatures are. And so then I started thinking, okay, great, I'm going to use this kind here. I'm going to use this creature over here. But who are the characters that we're going to follow? And I knew that I had to have something human-esque, human-adjacent for us to the audience, for us to follow, that we can identify with. So I started thinking long and hard about that, and I came up with a concept that really excited me. And so basically in this whole series, this whole saga, there really aren't humans in it, okay? They're all some form of a mythological creature. However, our main character is about as close to a human as you can get, and I'll kind of explain what's going on with that. So I decided I want the main character to come from a like more or less a section of this world that is kind of isolated. Because what I knew what I wanted this to be was a journey story, a story about somebody who goes on a journey. So I naturally decided that this somebody's going to come from a place in this bigger world that's kind of isolated and left alone. So the people, the beings that live there can kind of live in peace, and no one's bothering them because they're more or less just untouchable where they are. So when I thought about where could that be, I envisioned a mountain. And I'm like, okay, if there's people living on the top of a mountain, then no other creatures in this world will be able to, even though they're there, be able to get to them, won't bother them. They'll be out of sight, out of mind. And I'm like, well, who would live on a mountain? And it just was like, it needs to be people with wings, people who could fly. And I just kind of imagine the idea of like a bird sanctuary. If you go to like a bird sanctuary and you see all these birds flying around and they perch on things, and they have their little pier over here, and they have their little tier over there, and they have the perch over here, and they have this high point, and some are down low. And I just imagine this really kind of intricate ecosystem on top of this mountain that this race of people with wings built. Many years ago, centuries ago, they found this place and they built a home city on top of this mountain. So I was deciding, what's the city going to be? And in my mind's eye, what I saw were like tiers of like platforms. There are these like pillars that jut out from the mountain, made of mighty oaks that they like just kind of jammed into the mountain, and they reach out from the mountain like arms. And they create this network of like layered tiers that go all the way around the mountain and kind of go up it like a Christmas tree. And so you got high tiers, you got low tiers, you just got this series of tiers. And these people, they fly around from tier to tier, and they live in little huts and dwellings, and they have jobs, and they farm, and they do art, and they do things like that. And they just live this really like peaceful, angelic life on this mountain paradise, flying around on these tiers, just more or less living the life of Riley. And that's kind of how I envisioned it. And like I used the word angelic, and it's kind of how it is. They're on their high castle, and they're living up there, and they're living the life. And then I decided, so who are we gonna follow amongst that group? And I came up with the concept that there was one boy that was born without wings. He's a member of this race. He's part of this community, but when he was born, something happened and he doesn't have wings. Okay? The wings weren't there when he was born. So he's kind of already at a disadvantage from day one. He's kind of the odd man out from day one. Now, this being a peaceful place, there's not things like bullies or people mistreating him or anything like that. But he certainly doesn't feel like he belongs in a lot of ways. He feels like an odd duck. And that kind of thing fascinates me, because just the idea of just not feeling like you belong. I mean, I understand that. I know what that is. And I wanted to explore that concept. So I created this character. His name is Malachi. And he's born in this world. He can't fly. And everyone else around him can fly, and he can't. So he gets around he has this grappling hook and these ropes somebody had made for him. And he throws the grappling hook up a tier, and he shimmies up the rope, and that's how he gets around. And so I had this really solid, cool vision in my head about that. And so what I decided then was the kind of the hook is, these people revere the phoenix. The phoenix is like a deity to them. They love the phoenix, but the phoenix is out in the greater world, and they don't see the phoenix. They only, no one has seen the phoenix for generations. They just revere it. They know it's out there, but it doesn't come around or anything like that. It's just kind of more like a concept to them, but they still revere it. So the idea here with this series is and I won't go too far into it, but there's a catalyst that causes this character Malachi to get to a point where he decides that he has to leave this community, this mountain paradise, and go find the phoenix. There's something at stake, and he has to go do that. Another thing about this community is they are afraid of the outside world, because they know it is teeming with all manner of creatures from classical mythology. They know the world outside beyond their mountain is dangerous and scary and deadly, and they're safe here on the mountain. So they have no desire to leave, and you're actually not allowed to leave. It's like an unwritten rule that you have to stay put. This is because if you leave, you could potentially draw negative attention to the community. So, and the concept is, why would you want to leave? It's perfect here. This is a paradise. You wouldn't want to leave. And that's how most of the population thinks. But this character Malachi, for reasons that the story will make clear, decides he has to go. So it's kind of the interesting thing to me was the idea that you got this population of people with wings that really have the ability to go wherever they want, but they choose not to out of fear. And then you got this boy, this young character, who doesn't have wings and can't fly and can't get around easily. And he's the one that has the courage to actually leave and go on an adventure. And that's really, at the end of the day, what the Phoenix Saga is all about. And the first book that is coming out on June 3rd, 2025, and if you're listening to this after June 3rd, 2025, it is available on Amazon, is called Dawn of the Phoenix. And it gets into really what I just described. It introduces you to this world, it introduces you to Malachi, and it gets you into his story and gets you into his adventure where he goes out into the greater world and has to deal with all the dangers that are out there as he goes on his quest to find the Phoenix. And I'm extremely excited about it. I have written all 3 books, and I have every intention of all 3 books will be published back to back. There won't be a long, drawn out distance between all 3. I have book 2 with the editor right now, and once that comes back from the editor, I'll do my final pass, and I'm going to get on it. If everything goes according to plan, that one will be out this year as well, and then we'll put book 3 through the final editing and get that out hopefully before too long in 2026. So by this time next year, the whole saga should be out. But book 1 will be out on June 3rd, 2025. It'll be available as an ebook and available as a paperback right now. Eventually, I'd like to get an audiobook on it. That's a whole nother kettle of fish. I'm still working on that. But for the time being, it'll be an ebook and paperback. I'm extremely excited about this series. I think it's one of the best things I've ever done. I've been writing since I was a teenager, and this to me is like very personal. It's one of the deepest dives I've ever done. The research, the world building, the intricacies of it, the character dynamics, the ins and outs of all of this. It's definitely was a challenge, but it was a challenge that turned out to be a joyous thing to do, and I'm very proud of it. So that is just what the Phoenix Saga is about. And if you are at all interested, I would love it if you could hit the link. I'll have a link here in the notes in my YouTube channel here. It'll take you right to Amazon, and you can find it and you can check it out. And like I said, I promise you that this is something I'm not going to let go until the full thing is done. Yeah, if you start reading this, you decide you're interested in it, you like it, the rest of the saga is coming and will be complete. And I'm very excited about it. And if you're interested, I hope you can check it out. So that's about it for now. This video is running a little long, so I don't want to keep you too longer. But I really much appreciate you taking the time to listen and hang out with me here. And if you have any questions about books or writing or indie publishing or anything like that, feel free to reach out. I'd love to talk about it. And thanks again. I really appreciate your support. Until next time, have a good one.